Okay, folks, I think we've hit critical mass here with participants logging on, so we'll go ahead and get started. So again, welcome everyone. I'm Josh Roberts. I'm the mitigation coordinator with the Larimer County Office of Emergency Management. We're excited to bring this webinar to you today. It is the final stakeholder webinar that we're providing under this woody biomass study and strategy project that we've been undertaking for the past year. We started about a year ago. So this is the culmination of a years long process of investigating, fact finding, researching, learning, talking with many of you, and thinking around this challenge that Alicia and the Cambium team will describe here in a minute. And I'm sure you all are have been along with us, many of you in this journey, so you're well aware of. But this challenge that we currently have with respect to woody biomass following forest and wildfire mitigation treatments. And then also just a lot of effort put into thinking around what's the best thing to do about it. So this webinar is the culmination of that effort, along with, and we'll talk about it in this webinar too, it's out in draft feedback phase right now, but the report that we have that kind of details all the things that we've learned and all the things that we think might be good things to do, about this particular challenge. So if you're here to listen to us talk about our woody biomass study and strategy project, then you're in the right place. If you weren't intending to join this webinar this morning, it's okay. Stick around. You'll probably learn something. I know I will for sure. So we're glad to have you either way. Before we really get started, just a couple of little administrative items. Number one, so you guys may note that we're recording this webinar. So just heads up about that. In the days that follow this webinar, we'll certainly post the recording to our webpage, our project webpage, and we'll certainly send it out as well, a link to all of you guys that registered. So we'll share that in the days that follow, but just know that we're recording. Also, earlier I was testing out with John, but you guys should have the chat feature is disabled, but you should have the Q&A tool. So at any point in time, you have a question that you want to ask or even a comment to make, you just use the Q&A tool. It'll get logged and we'll answer it either written response or we'll answer it verbally. Also, feel free, you can raise your hand at any point in time, and then we'll unmute you so that you can ask your question or make your comment. No big deal. With that said, I also would be remiss if I didn't pass out a couple of really, really important thank yous here. So since this is the culminating webinar. But first up, I just want to thank the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. It is because of them and their award to us a grant through the Energy Mineral Impact Assistance Fund program that we're able to really dive deep into this, as well as also, of course, a big, big thank you to our county leadership for, asking us to prioritize this and devoting some resources to do it also. This is an important thing, for a lot of us in a lot of different ways. So, but without their sort of catalytic assistance with getting this thing started, we might not have been able to. So just a big shout out and a big thanks to those folks. I also want to give a really big thanks to those who served on our advisory team. And I know we'll show a slide here in a minute to where those folks can be recognized. You'll see their name, but I've said it many times, but we couldn't have done, it without them. All of their deep insights, their advisement, their connections, just their help along the way. We spent a lot of time with them. And so just really, really appreciative of their time and expertise and the help that they, gave to the project. And, of course, moving forward. I want to say thanks to our consultant partner. So Planet Geo did the lion's share. They did our GIS work, our geospatial analysis, and built some of the tools that we have. So really, really appreciate their efforts. And you guys, you know who you are. Y'all were a pleasure to work with for sure. And of course, to our Cambium consultant partner, So Alicia, Marissa, David, and folks on the Cambium team. I mean, just I can't speak enough, to you guys, and I can't say thanks enough, for all the things that you guys did. Of course, it goes without saying, we couldn't have done this without you guys as well. And then the final thank you, if I can just pass along, is to everyone who's on the call and everyone that we've talked to throughout this whole process. We've just learned so much. I know I have certainly learned so much through all the conversations, the meetings, the site visits, the tours, all those things. And it's, hopefully what you'll find in this webinar and what you'll find in our report and the associated materials is essentially just a reflection of your all's expertise, and thoughts, on this matter. We really did our best to try to compile it all, to be open for all kinds of feedback and insights, to find and tease out, the themes and find that sort of consensus, that common ground. And I think we did a really good job at that, but it wasn't without, your efforts there. So just a big thank you to everyone. So I'll be quiet now, and it's probably a good time for me to just turn it over to Alicia Blake with Cambium. Alicia will MC the webinar here for us. We'll facilitate it. So yeah, without further ado, Alicia, go ahead, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Josh. And, we have to, of course, do one more thank you for Josh Roberts. I think he is really the glue and the connector of a vast majority of this community, this project, and has been such a pleasure and such an honor to be able to work so closely with him, the Office of Emergency Management, and all of you. So, give Josh, honestly, a round of applause. I can't see or hear any of you all, but I'm hoping that you're doing that at your desks. Great. So Josh ran through this. Who are we? So I'll go ahead and push forward on this slide, but really excited to be here today. And also, Josh mentioned our advisory team. These folks were instrumental in pushing this project forward, connecting us to the community. So those of you that are here today online with us, thank you, thank you. Your insights were invaluable as we worked through the Woody Biomass Challenge. Those who aren't here today, also make sure that you say thank you to them the next time you see them, that you're with them in person or not. Just really can't say thanks enough to the collaborative efforts across Larimer County, the Front Range, neighbors near and far. So what are we going to be talking about today? This webinar is really the culmination of the project and is an opportunity for you all to learn more about our findings. We'll run through quickly project overview, some of the things that folks may have seen in the past in regards to stakeholder engagement, our analysis, and really hone in on some of our solutions and a preliminary concept that we're excited to share with you today. Before we do that, though, want to highlight that all of our draft materials are open to the public. They're open to all of our stakeholders, public and private, to be able to review and give us some feedback. So you'll get this presentation, as Josh shared, afterward. All of these links are live. Our feedback form is open until Monday, April 7th, and you'll see that we have a handful of different ways for you to consume the findings today. If you only have 5-10 minutes, I recommend hitting that project synopsis. It's pretty short and straight to the point of what we've learned. If you're really excited and want to dive into the details, the comprehensive report is for you. And then we have our two analysis tools, both the estimate dashboard as well as the workbook that we use to really understand some of the removals and estimates at a project level. So really just to center us again, why we're here today, the Woody Biomass Management Strategy Project was instituted as one node of addressing the wildfire crisis we face. So we're looking at a wildfire crisis that really demands we think about increasing our pace and scale across the county, across the Front Range, across the states, in terms of supporting mitigation for forest health, air quality, watershed resilience, public safety, etc. And so I really wanted to note that while we're talking about woody biomass management, it is just one node that can help act as a catalyst to support this crisis. It's not the only thing we can do. There are many, many other things, but it's what our focus is today. All right, so diving into the project. Really, the goal of this project was to think about a comprehensive woody biomass strategy for the county. When we say biomass, woody biomass, we think about those things that the forest byproducts that we remove from hazardous fuel treatments, both in woods and within our urban and community spaces. So that could also be something from pest and disease, as well as hazardous fuel accumulations and removal. What we might do with that, this is not an exhaustive list, but woody biomass comes in different shapes and forms, different characteristics, and those different shapes, forms, volumes, characteristics inform where that can be utilized. So logs might be turned into dimensional lumber, whereas something like tree limbs or sections or stumps are firewood. We'll zoom in on this a bit, but our key challenge throughout this process that we've learned from our stakeholders is not necessarily logs, more so our small diameters / material, what we've referred to as tips and feathers throughout. So what might we be able to do with that type of material in order to quote unquote pay its way out of the woods? Just in summary, a very big snapshot of things that we focus on in this project are threefold: the volume and characterization of the local biomass, engaging with our local stakeholders to understand the nuance of the challenge, and then evaluating different utilization pathways to help inform actionable next steps, all to support mitigation efforts via biomass management. We really led with this idea, and you all bought in, and we, again, can't say thanks enough that continued collaboration, communication, and transparency are really key in addressing this challenge. So thank you, but thank you. And just one more time, so we're all aware, really, this webinar is meant as a culmination of that comprehensive report and really looking at what is the actual strategy for implementation in the county. All right. So the first part of our project was really engaging with a variety of stakeholder groups. That was folks that generated woody biomass. So that could be tree care companies, loggers. That is also in partnership with either local conservation districts or forest managers that might really be helping to understand and designate forest treatment of each of these regions. Also, our utilization and processors. So folks that are taking wood from our spaces and really turning it into a product. So that could be dimensional lumber, that could be energy recovery, that could be biochar, you name it. And then also our government and policy partners. So folks from CSFS, CFRI, City of Fort Collins, Loveland, our economic and workforce development agencies. And we recognize that all of these people matter in this wood ecosystem to really understand how we can connect the dots across woody biomass utilization at large. You'll note there are some really key challenges and opportunities that each of these different groups highlighted. However, there was 3 things that we heard across all of these groups that we really needed to focus on. The first, infrastructure and capacity to reach and manage the woody biomass material. The second, processing low-grade material / and residue at high volumes. And then third, needing to aggregate and market the woody biomass cooperatively at scale. I'm going to pause here, and Josh, I wanted to call out to you to make sure that there isn't anything I'm missing from the stakeholder engagement that you might want to highlight.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. No, nothing missing. It's as great sort of just compilation of all the things that we've heard here into these themes. It's mountainous terrain, so accessing the sites where the material may be generated from. It's not as easy, in terrain that maybe has more, flat space and roads and, all of those things. So, of course, workforce in terms of capacity. Um, yeah, no, these are well said, Alicia. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so zooming in on the analysis. So we understood the challenges, but we also needed to know how are we thinking about and looking at the size and scale of woody biomass that might be removed from the forests. And in order to do that, we actually went through a rigorous exercise with a group of data advisors to determine a methodology. So just thank you again to folks. In addition to our advisory team, these are folks that were data advisors to help us understand what we had available in order to estimate, characterize, and understand the volume of the wood. Our analysis resulted in two different tools. So the first is our woody biomass estimate dashboard. This is available and live for you to use. The notion of this tool is not to tell you exactly what biomass needs to be removed. Rather, this tool is estimating the amount of biomass that is in any given space of the landscape. And so it's up to the forest manager and other folks to determine treatment, knowing how much biomass is there, the type of canopy that they're seeing, the type of treatment that might be needed. Second to that, we produced the woody biomass volume and estimations workbook. And this is really zooming in deeper on how we estimate the amount of biomass that might be removed based on different treatment scenarios informed by the forest managers and the practices that they're following today. So we looked at sources with our USFS partners, with our local conservation district partners, with our different watershed partners to really understand the types of treatment that they're applying to the landscape today and how that might change or evolve in the future. And then ran a handful of different scenarios to really understand if we were to be able to remove and take out as much biomass as possible, what might that look like versus based on our practices and current pace and scale today, what might that look like? And so this workbook is really a culmination of understanding how much biomass is on the landscape in total, and then overlaying estimated treatment opportunities and how we might scale or downscale them appropriately. I really, really want to call out that this is an estimation, right? Every single type of treatment that happens on the landscape is really project dependent and is really determined by a lot of different factors. So this was really used as a tool to help inform utilization pathways more so than describe or prescribe what type of treatment should be happening. So when we did our analysis, we looked at two different sources of woody biomass from the forest lands and from our urban and community spaces. Focusing on our forest lands, what we found, and this is highlighted within that dashboard tool, we have roughly 113 million bone dry tons of biomass across the county landscape. When we look at what is actually feasible and accessible, so things that we can get to based on slope, the mountainous terrain, road availability, of that, roughly 47.4 million bone dry tons are available to us today. But when you look at that and we say, and we apply our treatment level details, so thinking about how many tons might be removed per acre, and this varies based on a variety of characteristics. We're really only looking at a total of 1.3 to 7 million bone dry tons across the landscape available for removal. I'll note that this doesn't take into account any form of growth. This really is a snapshot in time based on a 2016 tree map data overlaid with high resolution imagery from 2021 Earth Define. Yeah, go ahead,
Alicia,
Josh.
yeah, so sorry. We also removed fire history as well, right, from this calculation.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, so we looked at previous treatment that already occurred as well as fire history and removed those acres as well. So this, of course, wouldn't include an area such as Cameron Peak. So when we look at our current pace and scale, we really looked at the low mid removal scenario, and that really measured up with what we're doing today closely. You can see here, so when you look at the screen, these are the 4 different partners that own land across the landscape at an aggregate level. And you can see that the size of the hourglass reflects the amount of land owned, whereas the aperture or the width showcases roughly how quickly that land is being managed. And this is based on an acreage rate. So what I mean by that is when we talked with our forest managers, when they said, when we asked how much roughly did you manage in terms of fire mitigation a year, it wasn't necessarily we do X amount of tons, it was more we look at Y amount of acres. And so based on that, we looked at practices and typical treatments, understood roughly how many acres were addressed, and then understood the rate of removal based on that. And you can see here, our federal government partners are moving at a quicker rate than perhaps our private and nonprofit partners. And this is important because the rate at which we treat our lands really matters on who has land ownership and accessibility to it. Something I want to shout out to is that during our conversations, particularly with our federal partners, there is still a lot of biomass being left on the landscape that they're not removing, that they're just choosing to leave either in a lop and scatter method or pile burning that has the potential to continue to be removed if there were markets for that woody biomass. Just to give you a scale of what we're talking about, this is a picture of a project on federal land for lodgepole pine, and you can see all of the dead biomass that exists on the ground today that they need to manage, as well as the density of the trees here, and in thinking about the thinning efforts that also need to happen in order to prepare this stand to be more resilient. From our urban and community side, we talked to 3 key government partners in the county to really understand the type of waste or wood waste that they're managing and how much annually. So we talked to the city of Fort Collins, city of Loveland, Organics Recycling Center, and Larimer County Solid Waste Team. I'll note that the numbers you see on the board here also include tons transferred from our Estes Park partners. And you can see that across our urban landscape, we are managing-ish about 30,000 bone dry tons of clean woody biomass. And so when you take those two numbers together, we're really starting to paint the picture of how much woody biomass we can propose solution sets for. I want to pause here, and I know that we worked closely with Dwayne Penny from our solid waste director and see if there's anything that Dwayne wanted to share on this slide in particular.
Yeah, hi, Alicia. I think, yeah, this is, we have another 40,000 tons of clean wood that's coming in and other mixed loads. And so there's just a lot of wood that's still getting buried in the landfill. And, you know, as we move forward working with this project to where it can go in the future, we're hoping to start working with end users and pull this woody material, both treated and untreated, out of the landfill and use it for other purposes. And so that's been a project Solid Waste has been working on for the last few years. And we have some plans in place to develop a C&D construction facility that will help facilitate that. And we think that will mix in really well with some of the biomass sort yards that have been discussed in this project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
So to really echo this point, when looking at our current pace and scale, we estimate approximately 100,000 bone dry tons, goodness, that's tough to say, are removed and managed-ish annually across the landscape here in Larimer County among all of our partners. That's not just unique to our forest managers. That's really between public, private, that is within our urban and community spaces as well. So really the question is, what might we be able to do with this? And also, what might we be able to do if we increase the pace and scale beyond 100,000 bone dry tons? That lended us into evaluating wood utilization strategies. So really the third prong of this project was to understand what type of technologies and pathways are out there, how do those best fit with the county, and how might we utilize the wood that we understand coming off the landscape through these different strategies. So I want to share this diagram because I think it does a really good job of understanding. On the left side, you can see the collection point and the different variations of how you might receive woody biomass material between those saw logs, saw diameter, and low grade, as well as the slash and residue, and then how that transitions throughout the supply chain into different types of woody biomass utilization opportunities. Really, our evaluation and analysis focus on how can we think about these utilization opportunities and through a deep evaluation framework. And that evaluation framework was this. It was taking those ideas of different utilization pathways and understanding their effectiveness. So how much wood are we disposing or can be disposed through this process? And also what type of wood or form in which that wood is received. Our impact on public good, so direct and indirect carbon sequestration, different co-benefits we might recognize. Efficiency, so what is the estimated ROI and or the level of capital investment required? Scalability, so is this ready to scale up or down? Is there demand within our current or potential markets? And readiness, is this a near or long-term solution? Is that technology available to us today? Are there other challenges that we might need to think about in terms of policy barriers, permitting, other requirements, etc.? From this framework, we worked with our advisory team to really prioritize and define how we might think about rating or applying scores to our different proposed proposed pathways. What I want to highlight here is that this is to be used as really a guide, and the way in which we chose to score each of our utilization pathways can vary based on your individual community. It's meant to be used as a tool for you to tweak to meet your own needs. And as our advisory team looked at this, we really looked at this at a countywide level. So the solutions that we looked at and the pathways that we looked at were these different items. So anything from durable wood products and energy recovery to carbon dioxide removal or soil amendments. And our findings are this. I want to highlight again that the goal of this evaluation was to provide guidance, helping to inform our policy decisions or other things. It's not to say that this is the end-all priority of how we're thinking about utilization pathways, rather as a way for us to help inform what might work best for the amount of material we're looking at, as well as the characterization of it. So you can see that something like gasification or direct combustion are at the top, and that's because we rated the volume of amount of material to be processed as really high, whereas perhaps something like traditional lumber products might fall into the middle because their ability and our market here might look a little bit different in terms of volume application. Similarly, our challenge was really slash and residue. So where you see compost and landscape mulch high, that really addresses the characterization needed in terms of opportunities to process the woody biomass at hand. Some other strategies that you see, such as wood fiber insulation, is such a nascent market that there's really more research that needs to be done and understanding its viability and opportunity in the space. Before I move on, I really do want to echo that it's not to say that we shouldn't do any of these things. If anything, our key takeaway here is we need to enable each of these pathways to continue to be able to utilize wood in a diverse way. And so it's not a single product or technology or pathway that can really help support fire mitigation efforts or support utilization at large. It's really thinking about how we can build the supply chain to enable folks, private and public alike, to be able to support those pathways. This leads us to a preliminary concept that we're excited to share with you today, called the Biomass Processing Network. So really, this is aimed at strengthening those local supply chains, enhancing our forest management partnerships, and accelerating fire mitigation efforts. When I say biomass processing network, it's really the idea of two key nodes: a satellite yard, which think of that as a small transfer site, process and collect up to 5,000 tons of wood waste from different project types, and biomass processing sites. So these are larger scale processing sites designed to aggregate upwards of 150,000 tons, located closer to our urban and peri-urban areas, access to major transportation, etc. The goal of these is to really work together in tandem to support the variety of utilization pathways that we evaluated. So this is just an example network of what we're looking at. And then the important thing to note is those satellite yards that you see here can really be scaled up or down. You can introduce as many or as little as you need to act as a transfer station or throughput within forest management activities. And from our biomass processing sites, we have a unique opportunity, as Dwayne mentioned, as solid waste looks to upgrade and start a new campus on the north end. How might we be able to think about bringing technologies and supporting wood waste utilization across green waste collection today, as well as forest management in the future? So I want to highlight this as an example network, but can help you paint a picture of how these might connect together. To zoom in more a bit on what a satellite yard is, we really look at these like 5 to 10 acres of land, potentially having a truck scale on site to understand and assess the amount of material there, front end loader to move material, mobile grinding equipment, etc., that could be used across multiple sites. And also there's an opportunity there when we look at our community groups who are already doing a lot of this work. How might there be a firewood processor or an air curtain burner to help support some of the slash piles already being put in place? The goal of this is really to consider how might these enable and work in smaller community mountain town settings, but then also act as a collective to be able to transfer that material to the biomass processing sites. To give you a picture of what we're talking about, material could look from a variety of ways. And in order to enable our loggers and forestry partners a quicker transition time to and from doing treatment work, as well as potentially having a space to store logs in the future, there is an opportunity here to consider cooperative agreements as well. Biomass processing sites, so these are more permanent settings that when we look at and think about how they might be able to be utilized is in biomass conversion at scale. So this is really collecting all the additional material from our satellite yards. They can also act as a drop point for folks within urban and community settings, given their proximity. This is an opportunity to help share fleet between different solid waste materials. And also it can act as a catalyst for education and outreach. As these sites grow, we can bring in new community members for workforce development or otherwise. When we say biomass conversion, this can be a lot of different things. Absolutely compost and mulch with potential for biochar, combustion or gasification mixed within. I want to pause here again, Dwayne. I know that there's a lot going on in solid waste in terms of thinking of development for different opportunities, and if there's anything you might want to highlight in talking about campuses.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. I think, like you've listed here, compost and mulch and different, types of processing techniques can be used for this material. And we've been looking at a compost facility for the North landfill area to complement the solid waste program. And it would also certainly complement the sort yards in the BMP if we can develop those programs. Biochar, there are a couple really good biochar technologies. One in particular that we work with is very excited about potentially setting up in Larimer County and helping with this program. And so there's quite a few discussions with technologies and different organizations that would be interesting in doing something at a bigger scale. Combustion, gasification. There are a couple bigger gasification plants in our southern states that have been running for probably 12 years now, 13. They do about 500,000 tons of biomass a year on one of them, and about half that on the other, and they both create energy. And so there's a lot of different opportunities to evaluate. Now, permitting with the state and county, certainly those are things that we haven't looked at in detail. It's something that we are looking at, but that's pretty much where we're headed with solid waste. Some of the stuff is going to take place with our solid waste. We get about 350,000 tons at Larimer County, and a lot of that material could be diverted. And so the biomass would fit in pretty nicely with what we're seeing in the future. So thank you, Alicia.
Thanks, Dwayne. So in summary, when you think about the biomass processing network concept, at current pace and scale, this is an illustrative, albeit busy, diagram that can paint the picture of where wood may be flowing from and where it may be going to. So you can see on the left where we see biomass coming from our forest lands, an additional amount of biomass that we might be able to manage in the future, as well as the biomass coming from our urban and community spaces. And similarly, you can see where some of that is just going and continuing to support all of our offtake partners and our private partners in the lumber, biochar, compost spaces that already exist, as well as helping to support and manage material, particularly some of that more challenging material through the green that is a part of the orange and green that is a part of the satellite yard and biomass processing sites in general. So the goal is for all these different partners to work together and to really understand how the supply chain and network can flow. What the biomass processing network does is it looks to create a foundation for us to scale in our mitigation efforts. Of course, right, that also means that in order to implement the biomass processing network and what it can do to help support our mitigation efforts, we still need to continue building our public and private partnerships, investing in infrastructure, building the markets for woody biomass, and continuing our outreach and education. Today, we're managing about 100,000 bone dry tons, but there is potential for that to grow if we enable the wood to pay its way out of the woods. So our next steps, we zoom in on these into our report in detail, but I wanted to highlight the key next steps that we think about in terms of implementation. One, it's been so clear how a collaborative group has really pushed this project forward. So we recommend continuing to establish that ownership and having an interdisciplinary group to move forward with the biomass processing network concept at large. A robust business plan. Dwayne called this out, really. Our key next steps is understanding our cost estimates, operational structures for biomass processing sites, as well as the satellite yards. We really need to hone in on what types of technology we might be looking at, how that mirrors with our available biomass today. Develop a funding and investment plan. So once we know what our business plan looks like and perhaps the technology we're thinking about, we need to find and explore ways to fund that. together with grants or other revenue models, public-private partnerships, etc. Evaluating the required permits. We need to recognize that there are regulations in place that matter, and we need to understand how we can work with and enable our facilities through required permits. The next is really looking to jumpstart and kickstart this project. So looking at implementing 1 to 2 pilot satellite yard projects. That can be anywhere among the county that we feel like we need support in terms of aggregating and collecting material for our plan mitigation efforts. Partnering with our local economic development agencies, really understanding how we can continue to work in workforce development, attracting private processors. And then lastly, the invaluable nature of continuing education and outreach. Really supporting consistent messaging to our partners, recognizing that managing woody biomass is one node in supporting the wildfire crisis. This photo is from our community workshop at the end of January. And I just want to highlight again that all of those next steps really take a collective and collaborative group. And these folks really help support in getting us to this stage. And these folks and others not in this room or not on this call will help us in supporting getting us to the next stage. I'm going to end this with, to that end, we still want to hear from you. So please, if you have any questions, drop them into the Q&A right now. But also make sure that you're providing us feedback either on this presentation, all of our materials, and anything else that you want to be able to know that is heard and shared. Last bit from a final bit of housekeeping. We'll look to publish our final report and officially close out the study and strategy phase of this project by the end of the month. Myself and Josh Roberts will always be available for questions. The county will resume ownership of other communications, but I can't say it enough. Please, please, please continue to talk to one another and collaborate as we move this project forward. Okay. With that, Josh, is there anything else you want to share? If not, we can open this up to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. I might, if I can, I'll just, before we open it up to questions, and also, by the way, in my statement here, feel free if you have your question, go ahead and type it, and then when I be quiet, then we can get to your question. But one of the things I'll mention, it's been a year-long process, and I know many of you are, have kind of been waiting. Maybe if you haven't been super plugged in with us along the way, but how are we going to resolve this, right? You're waiting on that answer, and so just to address, this challenge has really, for me, exposed a really complex collection of lots of different things that are all kind of interrelated and impact one another. Regulation, infrastructure, economics, supply and demand, not just the technology or the operational aspects of how we might resolve it or the partnerships, that it'll take to resolve it. But all of this complexity to me really speaks to a few notions. One, Alicia mentioned that there's no silver bullet. There's no single technology product or solution that resolves our challenge of, we've got too much biomass and not enough utilization, of that biomass. This biomass processing network might be the closest thing to a silver bullet. It's an enabling concept, right? What Alicia mentioned. It's the tide that would lift all boats, kind of thing. So that's an important notion, for me that I think I'd summarize for you all. Also, know that the biomass processing network, it's not a Band-Aid kind of thing. It's not something that's centered on solving today's issue or yesterday's issue, but it's a generational thinking sort of concept. It's how can we help resolve today's challenges as well as the challenges 10 years from now, 20 years from now, our children's challenges, right? Now, with that, our current wildfire crisis isn't going to be solved today either, right? So it makes a lot of sense to think in terms of resolutions on that same sort of temporal scale that the crisis exists within. So that's another important notion, I think. And all of those things really just mean that it's going to take time, and it's going to take widespread sort of support and partnerships and collaboration on it. So it's going to take resources, right? Just people, financial resources, and we're in this transition now from the study. We're starting to do and have been doing, as Dwayne mentioned, some feasibility planning, right? So, how feasible, is this biomass processing network? How can we start and ramp up the pace and scale of everything to help with today, and also not be blinded by today, not really seeing tomorrow, and vice versa. So we're doing a lot of feasibility sort of planning and thinking around this. And as Alicia sort of listed the next steps there. But, really all of those notions to drive home this point, this final, notion here. And it's one that we've tried to bake into our process of studying this challenge along the way. And that is, the spirit of working together, of collaborating, and we do this really, really well, in this part of our beautiful world here. And so that same spirit of working together, of learning from one another, of finding that common ground, those consensus, that's going to have to be parlayed, not just from the study, but into the next steps as well. So just a shout out to that same spirit, that we've had along this journey here and this whole time. Let's continue it. So thanks for that opportunity, Alicia, to say a few words there. And I know we're getting some questions. So Alicia, I guess what we can do is just look at the questions. So we'll answer some verbally. So from Tim, has and will the community at large been presented with a strategy, and have they been supportive? I'll
You want
start
to
it
take
off,
that?
Alicia.
Okay.
Yeah. So a great question, Tim. And, actually just a good segue from my last final comment, around collaboration. We really, really tried to make a lot of effort into being open and transparent and receptive to feedback, and tried to provide a number of opportunities for folks to provide that feedback. I don't know if it's possible to reach everyone every time in every place, right? But we've sent out monthly newsletters throughout the course of this project, and provided an opportunity for folks to sign up via our webpage. We've had our project webpage. We've conducted a couple of webinars similar to this, and open those up. We've had a workshop, a solutions workshop that was in person. I know it through my journeys and the engagement in the advisory team, it was kind of started a network of communicating and answering questions, with and two folks that might ask them in all of our journeys and walks, throughout the county in our daily job. So we've really tried to lean into that through those public materials, and it's no different. This final report, we've got it open for feedback right now, and it's listed on our webpage. So I'll also mention this: any of you that's listening on this webinar, feel free to share the information. Feel free to point folks to our webpage, to the study, point them to us if we can answer questions. Certainly willing to do all those things as well. Alicia, Marissa, or anybody have anything to add there?
No, I think you covered that really well, Josh. I actually think this dovetails really well with John's question, which is, has the Colorado timber industry commented what it would take to implement some of these solutions, and an approximate time frame to implement one or two of these solutions? And to that, John, I think it's a yes. And we absolutely, throughout our stakeholder engagement, went with the Colorado Timber Industry Association representatives. At our community workshop, we had loggers and foresters in the room affirming and actually thinking about ways and ideas to implement satellite yards at large. in terms of time frame and actually getting the boots on the ground, I think that that goes back to a deeper analysis of permitting, regulation, public-private opportunities, and ownership in general. So in short, absolutely yes, but there's always still more work and collaboration that needs to be done in moving into the next phase.
Yep. Thanks, Alicia. And I see the next question. Hey there, Commissioner. Good morning. The next question, how do we use this study and build out these concepts, into action and help along, public education to help folks understand, the urgency of the need and the support that's needed, the really rounded support that's needed for this work, and just that it would enable reforestation as well, in terms of our burn areas and just, healthy forests in general. So I think great question, right? And here's kind of where the magic, comes in. I think it's safe to say, and if I can speak, for our leadership a little bit, you know, we've got great leaders. We've got great folks that work in this community. I'm just not talking about county staff, right? But all of you, our partners, everybody who's involved in this work, protecting our watersheds, helping to make our forests healthier, reducing the wildfire risk. There's a lot of really good folks involved in this. And I think there's a lot of knowledge and we just need to start and continue to parlay a lot of this good knowledge to folks that may not have that exposure, to that knowledge yet. And it's going to take all of us to do that. So we really do have to think about educating, folks on the need and the whys and everything. But I think going back to the speaking for leadership here, to affect a change in a big way, it takes investment of resources, right? And so there's we'd be remiss if we invested those resources without really fully thinking all the way through, what the right thing is to do at the right time, at the right scale, and all those things considered. We want to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar, like everyone. And so that was the purpose of this study also, right? To let's, before we do or take any sort of significant action, because we know it'll probably require significant action, let's study this thing 7 ways from Sunday, right? Let's talk to a lot of folks. Let's find that consensus. And so I think that this study, I'm proud to say that I feel like it's done just that. And so I think that's the catalytic piece of this thing. We've got, a really robust study that we can point to and lots of details that we can find within this study that's informed by experts, from academia to boots on the ground, right? That we can point to and say, well, here's why, as we move forward. So hopefully that answers your question there. Thank you.
Yeah. I do want to add one more thing to that, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, and what I would call out in terms of education for the public, and I said it a handful of times throughout this presentation, is that biomass management from fire mitigation is just one node in supporting the wildfire crisis. So when I think about those other nodes, of course, it's the treatment efforts themselves, it's the reforestation efforts that you flagged, and really building this into the narrative of how are we supporting and addressing the wildfire crisis in multiple ways, right? That could also be as simple as making sure that your home is prepared for a wildfire as well, and then connecting biomass management back to those individual efforts that those folks can take. So it's really, in my mind, we're building in, excuse me, biomass management as one node to support wildfire crisis at large. All right. Zach says, could you elaborate on how, where data was gathered to generate scores for utilization pathways and how these scores may be continuously updated as nascent markets are developed over time, particularly with regard to lower scoring pathways? Absolutely, Zach. And so the way that we looked at scoring utilization pathways was a mix of a handful of things. Stakeholder engagement, looking at lit reviews of understanding the technology itself, looking at the price of the technology, understanding what actually existed regionally, and then also just really knowing excuse me, how we see or foretell that might impact the public good, or what workforce development might look like through that. So there are a lot of different ways that we tied into that. And in terms of, with regard to lower scoring pathways being quote unquote increased over time, like I said, that evaluation framework was really utilized as a guidance. And so when I think of something lower, such as fungal inoculation, I really feel that if you were a community-based organization or group that was looking at biomass management at a small scale, perhaps fungal inoculation actually would have scored much higher, because you're looking at smaller quantities, something that is reasonably cost effective to enter into that space. And those are things that you're thinking about more. Marissa, I saw you hopped on.
Yeah, I think this is the one other thing I would add to that. This is probably the hardest thing for us because, as you are pointing out, it's really a snapshot in time. And for us, technological readiness was a criteria in this analysis. And so we are going to lean a little bit more on what we're seeing as available markets in Larimer County and the region at large. I think obviously, you put a lot of investment into infrastructure for a different solution set, and those will become more viable, scalable solutions. So I think we were trying to paint a picture of both what is ready today, what we're hearing from stakeholders as promising investment opportunities. But yes, I totally agree that the levers will shift over time in terms of effectiveness and how those will score even a few years down the road.
Yep. Thanks, y'all. And I see not a question, but a comment. I think it's super astute, and it's super valid, so I should read it. Get a comment that urges us in the effort, and I guess all of us, to be comprehensive in our biomass market evaluations for each manufacturing or product pathway. Really, we can make lots of stuff from wood, but maybe even more important question is, well, how can that stuff make money, right? What would sell and how can it sell? So the economics, of this are super, super important. And with that, and Alicia, maybe a good segue. We've got a few folks from our advisory team here. So certainly to, their perspectives from economic development. You've heard from Dwayne and the solid waste industry, forestry and forest health. So I also just want to offer it up to those of you that are on the call from the advisory team. Anything that you guys would like to say and pass along to participants here. Go ahead and just raise your hand and I'll unmute you if you'd like. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, so it's okay if you don't really have anything prepared to say or don't have any comments. So yeah, go ahead, Dwayne. You should be able to unmute.
All right, thank you, Josh. Well, I just wanted to say some great questions coming in, and it's been a real pleasure working through this study with, all the different shareholders and all the experts in this industry, and as we look at the pathways, each and every one of them is going to be important for Larimer County because a lot of them will be applicable. And so it's exciting to see those different pathways. And like Marissa said, hey, this is what's available now. But as we begin to look into this and do more of a deep dive, that chart can be flipped upside down. And that's why we're going to be really open and do a really good deep dive into the different areas. And of course, the last thing I would say is the partnerships that have been created and will continue to be created are extremely important to this process. You've got industry experts, you've got a really good mix of a lot of talented people and organizations, and we need to keep that going and communicate. And then the last thing, talking about public comment, when projects of this nature begin to be implemented, there's a process that we go through. It's public notice and things like that. So things aren't just done behind the scenes and then all of a sudden a yard pops up and everybody has to live with it. There is a process that we go through at the state and local level. And I think those are important to make sure that we're communicating with the, the public and getting feedback. So that's it, Josh. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent points. Thanks, Dwayne. Really appreciate the insights and comments there. Okay, let's see. I don't think we have any other questions unless I'm missing something. Alicia,
I
Marissa.
don't see anything else. So I think we're okay to wrap up. And
Yeah,
I guess
I
I'll note
think
to
so.
that end, yeah, if you have questions, always feel free to reach out, but I will bot back and end on this for feedback form and really reviewing these project materials. We encourage you to share with your networks that maybe we're not reaching, or folks that you really do want to make sure they are commenting. Please, please, please send along. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your attendance today. We appreciate the engagement. This has been an amazing project to be able to work on, and really, really hope to see good things in the future. So thanks all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.